Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to discuss about servlets. Particularly I'll be discussing the hierarchy of interfaces and classes involved in HTTP servlets. We'll also see various methods which are part of HTTP servlets and how it is extended from its superclasses and super interfaces. Later we will also see HttpServletRequest and HttpServletResponse and its hierarchy of classes and interfaces. Towards the end, we will see a small comparison between what is an abstract class and interface, what are the similarities and differences, which is essential to understand these concepts. So let us start with the first superclass. Our supermost class in Java is object class, and this every class in Java extends object class, which means that all the methods which are part of object class are part of every other class, because object class every other class inherits methods from object class. In the same way, we have a abstract class called as generic servlet, which extends object class, which means that methods which are part of object class are also part of generic servlet. But since it's an abstract class, as I said, towards the end we will be clearly discussing the differences between an abstract class and a interfaces. But to summarize, abstract classes and interfaces cannot be instantiated, and it is basically used for abstraction by having abstract methods. And there are few differences between abstract classes and interfaces that is discussed in more detail towards the end of this video. So generic servlet is an abstract class which extends from object class, and it implements three interfaces. The first is servlet interface, second is servlet config, and the third is serializable interface. Interfaces are the ones which has abstract methods, which means that it has only the definition, but there is no body of the methods. So abstract classes and interfaces have abstract methods where it has only the definition without having the body of the method. So when a particular class or an abstract class implements an interface, it extends all the methods which have been defined in the interfaces. So the methods which are defined in servlet config, and serializable are all extended into this abstract class called as generic servlet. But they are supposed to be implemented in the subclasses which inherit this. So here abstract class, since it's an abstract class, so it may or may not implement the methods, but the succeeding subclasses should implement the methods which are defined in these interfaces. So these are the three interfaces, and these are the methods which are part of generic servlets. So we have methods like destroy, get init parameter, get init parameter names, get servlet config, init, service, log. All these are all different methods. The methods which are given in the blue color, like get init parameter, inherits from servlet config, and the methods which are given in orange color are inherited from servlet interface. So in this way, generic servlet abstract class contains the methods which are defined by these interfaces, and also the methods which are being inherited from the object class. And HTTP servlet extends generic servlet, which means that it's a subclass of generic servlet. But HTTP servlet is also an abstract class, which means that you can't instantiate HTTP servlet and create objects out of it, but we can have abstract methods. So this HTTP servlet also implements these three interfaces, which means that all the methods which are defined can also be accessible in HTTP servlet, and it has its own methods like do get, do post, do put, do delete, etc. And usually when you create your own servlet, you try to extend HTTP servlet, which is a class. So your servlet will be a class, which means that it has to implement all the methods which have been defined in interfaces and also in the abstract classes. So your servlet will extend the HTTP servlet, and thereby you have access to all the methods which are defined in its superclasses and super interfaces. So this is about HTTP servlet. Let us now see HTTP servlet request. So we'll see the hierarchy of interfaces and classes which are involved in HTTP servlet request. So once again, object class is a superclass which contains methods like toString, equals, all these are very common methods which are used. And we have servlet request wrapper, which is a class which inherits from object class, and it implements a servlet request interface, and it contains methods like get attribute, get parameter, get request, get servlet context, remove attribute, set request, etc. It also, and your servlet request is an interface, and HTTP servlet request is a sub interface of servlet request, which means that methods which have been defined in servlet request are all inherited into HTTP servlet request. But HTTP servlet request is also an interface, which means that it has only abstract methods, and we cannot instantiate interfaces. From Java 8, some of the interfaces can have some default implementations that I'll discuss anyway towards the end of this video. So HTTP servlet request is also an interface which extends servlet request, and servlet request wrapper is a class which implements servlet request. And now HTTP servlet request wrapper inherits from servlet request wrapper, which means that all the methods which are given in object class and servlet request wrapper are all inherited to HTTP servlet request wrapper. And HTTP servlet request wrapper implements HTTP servlet request, which means that methods which are defined in HTTP servlet request are all implemented, has to be implemented in HTTP servlet request wrapper. So methods like get session, get cookies, get method, get request URI, get request URL, get context path, and so on are all methods which are defined in HTTP servlet request wrapper. So this is the hierarchy of interfaces and classes involved in HTTP servlet request class. And usually when you try to implement, we create objects and we access these objects for implementing servlets. That we'll be seeing in the next video. So we'll also see now HttpServletResponse and the hierarchy of interfaces and classes involved in HttpServletResponse. In the similar way, object class is the superclass of all the classes, which has the following methods, and a servlet response wrapper inherits object class, so and it implements servlet response, and it contains methods like get writer, get response, set response, reset, etc. We'll be using get writer, get response, so get writer more often when we practically implement servlets. That we'll see in the next video. We have HTTP servlet response, which is a sub interface of servlet response, and it implements or it extends all the methods which have been defined in servlet response. So but HTTP servlet response is also an interface similar to HTTP servlet request. And we have HTTP servlet response wrapper, which is a subclass of servlet response wrapper, and it also implements HTTP servlet response. And the methods which are part of HTTP servlet response wrapper are add cookies, add header, send redirect, get header, get status, set status, etc. So this is the hierarchy of interfaces and classes and the methods associated at each level. And when we implement, we utilize the objects of HTTP servlet response and create our own servlets. So that is the hierarchy of HTTP servlet response. Now I would like to briefly give the similarities and differences between abstract classes and interfaces. When it comes to similarities, both cannot be instantiated, which means that you cannot create an objects out of abstract classes or interfaces, but both are used for abstraction, which means that you have abstract methods where you only define the methods without actually having the body of the method, and you leave it for the user to define the body of the method. This is the similarities. When it comes to differences, abstract classes have both abstract and non-abstract methods, whereas interfaces only have abstract methods. But now from Java 8, abstract methods which are part of interfaces have some default implementation, and both abstract classes does not allow multiple inheritance, whereas inheritance interfaces supports multiple inheritance. And abstract classes usually can be final, non-final, static and non-static, whereas interfaces only have static and final variables. Abstract classes can provide implementation of interface, whereas interfaces cannot provide the implementation of abstract classes. And abstract keyword is used for implementing abstract classes, and interface keyword is used for interfaces. And an abstract class can extend another Java class and implement multiple Java interfaces. So whereas an interface can extend only another interface. So this is one other difference. An abstract class can be extended using keyword extends, whereas an interface can be implemented using the keyword implements. And finally, a Java abstract class can have class members like private or protected member access, whereas members of Java interface are public by default. So these are the similarities and differences between abstract classes and interfaces. In the next video, we are going to implement our own servlet by extending HttpServlet and using HttpServletResponse and HttpServletRequest objects. Thank you.